In past years, I've addressed the most pressing dietary issues of our time. Like, what's the healthiest variety of apple? Or what's the most nutritious nut? Or dried fruit? Or what's the best bean? What's the best berry? What's the best bowel movement? Right? We had fun. People got to vote. You know, some folk came away all huffy. You know, especially the New Yorkers back there. But this year, I thought I'd lighten it up and answer: what's the best way to prevent death? Every year, the CDC updates the latest leading causes of death in the United States. So, let's start at the top and go down the list, see what's new in each category. Heart disease, number one, the 35-year follow-up of the Harvard Nurses' Health Study just published. Now, the most definitive long-term study on older women's health we have. Since the study started, thousands of participants died, but that allowed them to study the risk factors for mortality. Because heart disease was the leading cause of death, it comes as no surprise that dietary cholesterol intake, right, was a significant risk factor for dying. The second leading cause was smoking-related cancer deaths. But what's so neat about this study is that it's a competing risks analysis. Right? So it allowed them to compare different risks to one another. So consuming the amount of cholesterol found in just a single egg a day appears to cut a woman's life short as much as smoking 5 cigarettes a day for 15 years. The most protective behavior they found was fiber consumption. Eating just a cup of oatmeal's worth of fiber a day appears to extend a woman's life as much as 4 hours of jogging a week. Though you can do both. So it's worth noting that, look, the intake of cholesterol only found in animal foods was associated with living a shorter life, and the intake of fiber only found in plant foods associated with living a longer life. The one specific food most tied to longevity was nuts. You also appear to get 4 hours of weekly jogging benefit eating just 2 handfuls of nuts a week. All right. Yeah, heart disease, number one cause of death. But what if your cholesterol is normal? Right? Hear that all the time from patients. Right? Have to break it to them. Look, having a normal cholesterol in a society where it's normal to drop dead of a heart attack, not necessarily a good thing. And remember, it's our number one killer. Right? In a huge study last year, most heart attack patients fell within the recommended targets for cholesterol, demonstrating that the current diet guidelines are just not low enough to cut heart attack risk. Close to half of heart attack victims had cholesterol levels classified in the guidelines as optimal, though I'm not sure their grieving spouses and orphan children will take much comfort in that fact. What is considered optimal is still way too high. Yeah, having a below average cholesterol, reduces your risk, but as the editor-in-chief of the American Journal of Cardiology wrote more than a decade ago, it's time to shift, right, from just decreasing risk to actually preventing and arresting atherosclerosis. We don't want low risk, we want no risk. How do you do it? Well, for the buildup of plaque in our arteries to cease, it appears that we have to get our total cholesterol down to be about 150, right? In other words, the cholesterol must be lowered to that of your average pure vegetarian. Now, but because relatively few people are willing to abide by the vegetarian lifestyle, drugs are required, to get down to similar levels, right? So it's our choice. Now notice though, even though the average vegan has a cholesterol of 150, it doesn't mean that all vegans have 150. That's why I do free cholesterol screenings here at Summerfest. Stop by my table, a little drop of blood, just take a couple minutes. I'd be happy to do that for you. All right, so it's our choice, diet or drugs. why not just choose the drugs, right? Well, no, that's a good question. Well, as the good doctor noted last night, the FDA just announced newly mandated safety labeling by law to cholesterol-lowering statin drugs, right? So this is Lipitor, Mevacor, Crestor, Zocor, Vytorin, that kind of thing. The FDA issued new side effect warning labels this year regarding the increased risks, brain-related risks, associated memory loss and confusion, an increase in blood sugar levels, as well as new onset diabetes. One prominent cardiologist described this kind of Faustian bargain: yes, fewer heart attacks, but more diabetes, right? With all the memory loss and confusion caused by these drugs, folks may have forgot there's actually a way to reduce the risk of heart attacks and diabetes at the same time. Called the plant-based diet. All right, now cholesterol is just half of the heart disease story. The other half is inflammation. Right? We've known for 15 years that a single meal high in animal fat, sausage and egg McMuffin was used in the original study, can paralyze our arteries, right? Cutting their ability to relax normally in half within hours of eating animal products. The whole lining of our vascular tree gets inflamed and stiffened, right? And just as that inflammation, so here's hours, right? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Just as that inflammation, right? Just as that crippling of our arteries starts to finally calm down after 5 or 6 hours, lunchtime, right? And then we may whack our arteries with another load of meat, eggs, or dairy, right? And so most people are in this chronic state of low-grade inflammation, increasing risk for these inflammation-related diseases like heart disease, cancer, diabetes, one meal at a time. Does the same thing to our lungs. Right? Again, within hours, inflammation in our airways. A single meal causing internal damage, not just years down the road, but literally right then and there, that day, within hours of it going into your mouth. And just this year, we finally figured out, we finally solved the mystery as to why. And it doesn't appear to be the animal fat itself. And it's apparently not the animal protein, which is what's implicated in the inflammation from arthritis. Right? So if it's not the animal fat and it's not the animal protein, what is it? The whole thing is a crazy cool detective story that I'll be putting in a series of videos next week, actually, July 4th, July 5th, July 6th. But I'll just cut to the chase, spoiler alert. After a meal of animal products, people suffer from endotoxemia. Their bloodstream becomes awash with bacterial toxins, known as endotoxins, that are present in the animal products. So, I mean, no wonder our body goes crazy. These dead meat bacteria toxins aren't destroyed by stomach acid, aren't destroyed by pancreatic enzymes, right? Aren't destroyed by cooking. They tried boiling meat for hours, still didn't work. And so these bacterial toxins were found to be highly resistant to cooking and our body's best attempts at acid and enzyme digestion. Now, the animal fat actually does play a profound role in this whole process by ferrying the bacterial toxins present in the meat through the gut into our system. So the reason animal products trigger immediate inflammation appears to be because they're so loaded with bacteria that can trigger inflammation dead or alive, even if they're fully cooked. Right? And then saturated animal fat then boosts the absorption of these toxins into our bloodstream. So now that we know what's going on, what do we have to do? Well, from a 2012 follow-up, well, the most obvious solution to this metabolic endotoxemia, okay, well, we can reduce saturated fat intake, which in this country is mostly cheese and chicken, but the Western diet is not conducive to this mode of action, and it is difficult for patients to comply with this request. Right? So what? Let's not even tell them, right? I mean, this patronizing attitude in the medical profession of, oh, patients won't change their diet or stop smoking. I mean, even if it's going to kill them, you know, so why bother, right? That attitude may be one of the real leading causes of death. But let's get back. But let's get back to the official list and take on cancer next. What's the latest? Well, we know from the largest forward-looking study on diet and cancer ever performed by humanity, the incidence of all cancers combined lower among vegetarians than meat eaters, especially some of the fastest growing tumors like lymphomas and leukemias. And for that, the worst meat was actually poultry, chicken. Up to triple the rates for every 50 grams of poultry consumption. A quarter of a chicken breast, triple your risk. Normally, this whole presentation being the kind of quiz show format, but there was a scheduling mix-up. I was supposed to be the last speaker at night, and so I could go long and not interfere with the schedule, but anyway, won't happen again, and so next year back to the quiz show format, and apologize, I had to cut this short. Okay, but the link between meat and cancer is such that even the Journal of Meat Science last year asked, should we become vegetarians? Or they said, can we make meat safer? There's a bunch of additives, for example, that can suppress the toxic effects of the blood-based iron, the heme iron found in meat. Now, the additives are still under study, but could provide an acceptable way to prevent colon cancer, right? Because avoiding meat, obviously, completely out of the question. I mean, that's... They fear that if the National Cancer Institute recommendations to reduce meat consumption were adhered to, sure, cancer incidence may be reduced, but farmers in the meat industry would suffer important economic problems. Now, for those of us more concerned about the suffering caused by the meat industry rather than the suffering of the meat industry, what happens if you put cancer on a vegan diet? Well, the Pritikin Research Foundation just completed this elegant series of experiments, which I want to spend a bit of time on. Simple experiments. They put people on different diets, draw their blood, and then drip their blood on cancer cells growing in a petri dish, and just stood back to see whose blood was better at suppressing cancer growth. They're the ones that published that study showing that the blood of those on a vegan diet was dramatically less hospitable to cancer. Now, even the blood of those on a standard American diet fights cancer. I mean, if it didn't, everybody'd be dead, right? It's just that the blood of those eating vegan fights about 8 times better. The blood of those on a standard American diet suppresses cancer growth by about 9%. You put people on a plant-based diet for a year, though, and their blood just tears it up. Right? The blood circulating through the bodies of vegans has nearly 8 times the stopping power when it comes to cancer cell growth. Now, this is for prostate cancer, most common cancer among men. For women, it's breast cancer. So the Pritikin researchers tried duplicating this study with women using breast cancer cells instead. Now, they didn't want to wait a whole year to get the results, so they figured they'd try to see what a plant-based diet could do in just 2 weeks against 3 different types of human breast cancer. This is the before, cancer growth rates powering away at 100%, and then this is after eating a plant-based diet for just 14 days. Now, slowing down cancer growth is great, but getting rid of them, getting rid of cancer cells is even better. This is before and after measuring cancer cell death, right? This is the before, and this is the after. Pre and post plants. The same blood now coursing through these women's bodies gained the power to significantly slow down and stop breast cancer growth thanks to just 2 weeks of eating a plant-based diet. What kind of blood do we want in our body? What kind of immune system, right? Do we want blood that's just kind of roll over when new cancer cells pop up, right? Or do we want blood circulating to every nook and cranny within our bodies with the power to slow down and stop them. Now, this strengthening of cancer defenses was after 14 days of a plant-based diet and exercise. They were out walking 30 to 60 minutes a day. Wait, well, maybe the only reason their bodies became, so effective at suppressing cancer cell growth was because of the exercise. Maybe diet didn't have anything to do with it. So they put it to the test. This is measuring cancer cell clearance. And this is what we saw before, the effect of blood taken from those eating a plant-based diet, in this case for 14 years, along with mild exercise, just like walking every day, right? So, plant-based diets, walking, that's the kind of cancer cell clearance you get. Now, compare that to the cancer-stopping power of your average sedentary. You see this little burger, apple? Oh, sorry, I can't. All right. On the website, it's a little, okay, but okay. Okay, compared to the cancer-stopping power of your average sedentary meat eater, which is basically non-existent. Okay. But what about this middle group? Now, this middle group, instead of 14 years on a plant-based diet, they had 14 years of the standard American diet, but had daily strenuous hour-long exercise, like boot camp this morning. Seriously, calisthenics, right? They wanted to know, if you exercise hard enough and long enough, can you rival some strolling vegans? All right. Let's find out. And exercise worked, no question, right? But literally 5,000 hours in the gym, no match for a plant-based diet. Here's an actual photomicrograph of cancer cells stained so that they release light when they die. Right? As you can see in the control group, there are a few cancer cells dying. Right? Even if you're a couch potato eating fried potatoes, your body's not totally defenseless. But here's the hardcore strenuous exercise group, right? Cancer cells dying left and right. But nothing appears to kick cancer butt more than a plant-based diet. Why, though? Some people don't care, but I'm always curious. All right. How does a simple dietary change, right, make one's bloodstream so inhospitable to cancer after just a few days? We didn't know until last year, when they sought to determine the underlying mechanisms for these anti-cancer effects. All right. And it is a wild story. I have a whole series of videos coming out about it. The story involves little people and big big dogs and little dogs. It involves marshmallows, Tinker Toys, cannibalism, and vegan bodybuilders. From beefsteak to beefcake. I wish I had time, believe me. But the videos will be up soon. Bottom line, the answer to the Pritikin puzzle is IGF-1, insulin-like growth factor 1, is the cancer-promoting growth hormone involved in every stage of cancer growth, spread, metastases, cancer invasion. But you put people on a plant-based diet, and their IGF-1 levels, plant-based diet, go down. And if they continue to be on a plant-based diet, this is just after a few weeks, if you're on a plant-based diet long-term, levels drop even further. And their IGF-1 binding proteins go up. That's one of the ways our body suppresses cancer growth. Protect itself from cancer. Protect itself from excessive growth by releasing this binding protein into the bloodstream to bind up, to tie up IGF-1. It's like our body's, kind of emergency brake. Yes, in as little as 11 days, right? A plant-based diet can reprogram your body to bring down IGF-1 production, right? But what about all the IGF-1 that's circulating from the, bacon and eggs you ate last week, right? So the liver releases the snatch squad of binding proteins to tie up, to take all this IGF-1 out of circulation. And as you can see, it just gets better with time the longer we eat healthy. Here's the experiment that nailed IGF-1 as the villain. All right, same as last time. Go on a plant-based diet, and cancer cell growth rates drop dramatically. Right? And cancer cell death shoots up. Already saw that. But then, here's the kicker. Right? What if you added back to the cancer the exact same amount of IGF-1 banished from your body by eating a plant-based diet? Eating plant-based diet goes back. Let's take that same IGF-1, add it back to the cancer, and see what happens, and it erases the diet and exercise effect. It's as if you never started eating healthy at all. Right? So that's how we know that lowering animal product consumption leads to lower IGF-1, which leads to lower cancer growth. But how low does our animal product consumption have to go? And how plant-based do our diets have to get? Well, let's look at the IGF-1 levels of meat eaters compared to vegetarians compared to vegans. Right? Does a plant-based diet, is it better at lowering circulating levels of IGF-1 compared to a meat-eating diet or a lacto-ovo diet? And this is what they found. Right? Only the vegans, so meat eaters, vegetarians, vegans, only the vegans had significantly lower levels, and the same relationship was found with IGF-1 binding protein levels, right? That's what we want higher. Again, we got nothing here. One really had to go to that final step, vegans, to significantly bind up all that excess IGF-1 in their bloodstreams. Right? This was a study done on women. What about vegan men? They found the same thing. So even though vegan men tend to have significantly higher levels of testosterone than both vegetarians or meat eaters, which actually can promote the growth of prostate cancer. But the reason a vegan diet can actually reverse the progression of cancer, which I've shown you in previous years, the Dean Ornish work, may be because of how low their IGF-1 levels are. So high testosterone, but still low cancer in the vegans. The bottom line is that male or female, right? Just eating a vegetarian diet did not seem to cut it, right? Didn't do your body many favors. Right? Looks like to get that significant drop in that cancer-promoting growth hormone levels, one really has to move towards eliminating animal products altogether. Now the good news is that now, based on what we know about IGF-1, we can predict that a vegan diet may be profoundly protective with respect to risk, for example, for breast cancer in older women. Okay, just 13 leading causes of death to go. All right, let's run through the list here. The top 3 killers used to be heart disease, cancer, stroke. Oh, that is so 2011. Now it's heart disease, cancer, and COPD, like emphysema. All right. Thankfully, COPD can be prevented with a plant-based diet and even treated with plants, if you want to check that out. Now, of course, the tobacco industry took these landmark findings a little differently. Instead of adding plants to people's diets to prevent emphysema, wouldn't it be simpler to just add them to cigarettes? And voila! The addition of acai berries to cigarettes evidently has a protective effect against emphysema in smoking mice. Next, they're going to start putting berries in meat, right? I couldn't make this up, people. Look at this. Adding fruit extracts to burgers, right? Now, this was not without its glitches. The blackberries literally dyed the burgers with this kind of distinct purplish color. Though infusing lamb carcasses with kiwi fruit juice before rigor mortis set in does evidently lead to greater tenderness in the meat. And it is possible to improve the nutritional profile of frankfurters by adding ground up grape seeds, though there were complaints that the grape seed particles, right, were visible in the final product. And look, if there's one thing we know about hot dog eaters, it's that they're picky about what goes in their food. Right? Pig anus, okay, but grape seeds? Preventing strokes. Number 4. Preventing strokes is all about eating potassium-rich foods. Potassium from the words potash. You take any plant, put it in a pot, reduce it to ash, and what you're left with is potassium. True story. But can anyone name me a plant food particularly high in potassium? Why is that like the one thing everyone knows about nutrition? Seriously. Like, did Chiquita have like this great PR firm or something? I bet you could walk into the Heart Attack Grill where they're eating food like this, right? Ask anyone, and they'd be like, I don't know, Dave, but I do know bananas got potassium, right? Right? All right. In reality, bananas don't even make the top 50 sources. Coming in at number 86, right behind fast food vanilla milkshakes. And then bananas. All right. In the top 5 sources are tomato and orange concentrates, and in terms of whole food sources, it is greens, beans, and dates. In fact, if you look at the next leading cause of death, right, bananas could be downright dangerous.